Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the session. My name is Andrew Tom. I'm a senior data analyst at DBT Labs, but also your MC for this session. Today's talk is titled Snowflake Yourself, Using DBT for Snowflake Access Control and Management. So quick show of hands. Who here in the room is a Snowflake or DBT admin? Cool. All right, then this is absolutely relevant. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Daniel Corley. Come on up.
Right.
Dan is an analytics engineer coming from operational and analytics roles at early stage startups. And now he's with Spot On, based in Chicago, powering the data organization. Pleasure to have you. Some quick housekeeping before we start. All conversation and Q&A will take place on Slack at the Coalesce Snowflake Yourself Using channel. So if you haven't already joined, please join that channel and drop your questions as they arise. And that way, we can connect with all the remote attendees that are also tuning in. If you're tuning in and you're not part of our community Slack, please join our community Slack at community.getdbt.com and join the conversation there. Afterwards, our speaker will hang around in Slack for a little bit to answer any emergent questions. And our trusty Slack monitors are going to be pinning those questions as they come up. Without any further ado, let's get started.
Thank you. I'll grab this thing. All right, cool. So there goes my first couple of slides. Thank you for taking care of that. But as was mentioned, hi, I'm Dan, or Daniel, or hey, you, that guy with the face. As long as you get my attention, that's fine with me. But not to take really too much time before we get into what we are talking about today. As mentioned, I'm a data analytics engineer at Spot On. So I sit on our analytics team, really supporting the whole organization. I primarily help with the ingress and egress of data from our Snowflake instance. If you don't know of Spot On, we're essentially point-of-sale systems. But we're also a lot more than that. We have a whole suite of software helping businesses win, ranging from mom and pop shops to real enterprise clients. These really range from labor management to website hosting to marketing to credit card processing. We're really just aiming to be a one-stop shop for these restaurant and retail businesses. So our team on the analytics org provides insights to our different business organizations. We really help the company drive with data, one may say. We really just help with the big major KPIs like how many hot dogs we sold over the weekend, things like that. So before I get into everything, I just want to set the mood a little bit. So quick scenario. So your company recently set up Snowflake. And all the migrations of your legacy pipelines have been keeping most of your time. As a one-person team, you've been running around trying to ensure that nothing is breaking. So finally, you have it so Metabase is querying, Airbyte is loading, Metaplane is observing, and of course, DBT is transforming. So work has calmed down a bit, and you look into how your organization has actually been utilizing Snowflake. You notice someone has been querying a table that they shouldn't really have access to. So you go and look in the Snowflake user UI to modify these settings back to the way that they should have been this entire time, and all is well. So it brings up a couple of questions. When did this change? Who granted this access in the first place? And when will this change again? So if these questions have come up before, or that piece made you start really thinking about what's actually going on inside of your warehouse, well, welcome to Snowflake Yourself. Object Management with DBT. Sorry, I kind of changed up the title a little bit there. So the title says it, but I really just want to clarify. This actually isn't just limited to Snowflake. To boil it down, this is really just managing objects in any warehouse that can accept DDL statements utilizing DBT macros. And so for the sake of reference in this talk, an object can really be anything ranging from a user to a role to even a stored function. I'm going to be talking broadly, really quickly about the theory and the challenges that we face on how we really got to where we are today, followed by a quick example on how we've actually set up this user base. So a little bit less broad theory and actually a hard code reference for those of you here. So to start us off, problems that we're really solving for. So we're really looking for extensibility. We're really looking to apply these engineering practices to our grant workflows, kind of the same way that DBT did this for the analytics engineering practice. And then really looking into reusability into other databases or warehouses, just thinking about utilizing dbt run. As long as you can connect to your warehouse, you can change some of the DDL and you're quick up and running. So Snowflake to BigQuery, Teradata, even if you want to. Secondly, thinking about structurability. So we're really thinking about creating a playbook that we can use to modify all of the objects in there. So going over a quick user example that we have today, but really just any object inside of your warehouse that you can fathom. Snowflake makes it really easy to manage these, but we really needed something to not only scale up with us as our user base increased, but also out with us as we're creating more and more of those objects. Thirdly, simplicity. By utilizing a familiar infrastructure and syntax, we can have other people's contribute. So really just creating a really low barrier for people to join what we're trying to achieve. And also looking for a nice centralized location that we're already working in so that our team doesn't have to manage yet another piece of technology. So on our team, on the engineering side of things, it's myself and my boss, Ben. And we're already managing Fivetran for our data loading, Snowflake for our warehousing, DBT for our transformations, Metabase for our simple service analytics, Tableau for our advanced analytics, Meltano for our ingress and egress, and Metaplane for our data observability. I tried to get through that in all one breath, but couldn't quite do it. I'm sorry. So you can see, as one of those tools go down or multiple, we don't want to keep adding to that stack so that we have to drop everything when something goes on fire. The less tools that we can have, the easier we're able to scale up our analytics practices. And then lastly, I really tried to make this rhyme for you all, but version controllability, or might have pushed it there. But really just allowing visibility into the current standing of our Snowflake objects. So thinking of a single place to look for info when our security ops team comes and has a question similar to the one that I brought up in that scenario. And then also, ultimately, the ability to roll back everything when we inevitably mess things up. So if you didn't think I was going to talk about DBT today, you're wrong, obviously. DBT really just fits the bill for all of those things. First off, it has a version control first mindset. While you can technically run it all locally without a repo, I wouldn't really suggest that. And you all know DBT Cloud, you actually have to build it off of that. So with that in mind, it really made it a great candidate for what we were trying to do. Secondly, being open source, we can really scale out to those new objects really easily. It's just providing that backbone that we can build upon. So we actually started utilizing this to manage our snow pipes. And are starting to look at this as streams as well, along with whitelists, roles, and other objects inside of there. For those of you that don't know what those things are, really quickly, Snowpipe is just a way to bring external data to your warehouse. I think CSVs from object storage without an external data loader. And then streams are essentially change data capture on your tables. And then also on the open source part, if you participated in the hackathon yesterday, thanks so much for your contributions. And lastly, the simple syntax inside of this. Everybody knows and loves dbt run, dbt builds out there. And we're already using it for our warehouse transformations, so it makes it really easy for the team involved to understand everything that's happening. Not only just our team, but the entire developer base at Spot On. And then also for yourself yourselves as well, the entire DBT community. As you all know, it's really easy to hop onto Slack and get some external eyes on a project that you're working on. It's really nice to have that other set of eyes. Okay, so with all the theory and kind of how we've got here today, I'm actually going to go through a quick demo of how we utilize this in our user base. I'm going to take a quick look at what Snowflake has to offer and then move into more of our homegrown DBT solution. And also, disclaimer, this isn't going to be live in the sense that I'm going to be clicking through everything around in my IDE. There's really just too much at stake here. So I'm sorry for those of you that get a thrill of watching people do things live. Let's just take a quick look at my screenshots. OK, so for those of you that have created users before, you've probably seen this. The Snowflake user creation UI. Now, there's nothing really bad about it. Snowflake created this clickops tool to make our lives easier, and really, it does just that. Anybody can go in with a computer and figure out how to add a user. The UI UX is great. Hats off to Snowflake for this. But their tools aren't really flexible or customizable. You can create a user and add different attributes. That's really just about it. And also, there's no version control. You could go in and check the query logs, but there's no real centralized knowledge repository. I'd say the real downside to this is just being that you have to do it one by one. It may not take a lot of time, but it does get very monotonous, and you'll become the bottleneck if you're trying to onboard a lot of these users at once. Also, we're all engineers here, so where's the fun with clickops tools? One thing it is really nice for, I'll give it that, it is good at generating the DDL involved to create these users. So clicking on that Show SQL button down there will spit out the code that you can then copy into a worksheet and run everything that you would have if you were to click Finish. So example of this code, you can paste it right in the shiny new Snow Site worksheet and run these commands. While it is really easy to get started by creating a script for these roles, users, databases, shout out to Jericho on the DBT post on how we configure Snowflake, there's no real bulk operations here. You're still limited to overriding these different attributes each time you'd want to go in and create a user. And also, once you've created all your users, you'll probably want to later modify these attributes, which you can do so with these quick alter statements. So keeping a script like this available on your machine locally, you can quickly onboard as many users as you'd like. But then again, we get into our static scripts. We're not looking for something that will only scale up with us, but also dynamically maintain users and these other objects. And also, after doing this many times, you may run the risk of human error. There are no rails for what you're really throwing at this. We also get into our original problem statement of when did X have Y? So enter DBT and hopping over to VS Code. And so from here on out, it is going to be dark mode. Sorry for those of you that don't use it. You're doing it wrong. But this may look familiar to you all. It seems like a normal DBT repo with your seeds, your models, your snapshots, your macros. What's that Snowflake folder that I have open? That Snowflake folder is going to be our data store. So inside of these YAMLs is going to live the metadata for our object creation. So clicking into the user's YAML file, we see a framework similar to our DBT project YAML in the base directory. So lots of key value pairs with information mapping to our Snowflake user base, how it should look at this point in time. So you may see some attributes that we didn't see in our last slide of the user creation statement, namely the network policy and the disabled flag. This is because this is designed with flexibility in mind. Any properties or parameters that you can find on the Snowflake create alter docs you can actually be added here in the key value attribute list. It'll scale up and down, so as much or as little as you need it to. So how does this happen, you may ask? Let's take a look at our first macro. So enter Jinja. For those of you that haven't dived further into Jinja further than ref and source, I would definitely recommend it. It is a way to supercharge your DBT project. And a quick run through of what all this code is really set up to do. First and foremost, for you eagle-eyed audience members, you may have noticed that passwords are missing from our users file. And this is by design. So we want to pass in a temporary password at runtime as a variable, set up right there in the top, so that we're not storing these values as we're going forward. So you're welcome, security ops. Second, getting into our user SQL statement, we're going to create a transaction block so we can roll back this if anything does error out. And speaking from experience here, the first time we tried to run this, we actually tried to drop the Snowflake user, which, as you may know, is like admin of all admins on your account. Probably not something that you want to do. So it's always good to be able to revert if anything does go awry, and also taking a soft delete stance by default. Secondly, we are going to be using the security admin role. You should really only tap into these super user roles when something is needed to be setting up for resources or configuring these permissions. Very few users should have access to these roles. And this is actually how we have an understanding that everybody with these rules will use these tools to maintain our infrastructure. So we don't ever happen to not have everything in Snowflake that we have in our YAML files, and so they don't become out of sync. So getting into the meat and potatoes of our tool here, we're going to start an iteration over all of these users. In each iteration, we're going to pull out and set some variables defined for each of these users. These are going to be in the top level keys of our YAML file, and we're going to use these to reference later on in our code. And you may also notice that inside of the roles variable, that we do set a default variable. That's just in case we do forget to set anything in the YAML file. It's a good way to really check or add some checks and balances into our user creation. And then after the initial variable set, we notice some familiar DDL that mirrors our code example generated from the Snowflake UI, along with a for loop and an if-else statement. So this really creates the ability to route our input to Snowflake to deal with things like proper capitalization and string formatting. Thinking about like modifying to title case for our user display names or passing it in exactly as we do in our YAML for our passwords. Or we could just break this and take the DBT stance of just lowercase everything. So after modifying our object properties, we can then attach these roles to our users in the same for loop fashion. So after doing so, we break out of our user loop and start in on the next users. After our iteration is complete, we end our transaction block with our commit statement. And then, so after all of that is going to be generated, we don't want this to just be a black box of execution. So we use the log function down there to spit out everything that you're going to be sending in your terminal. And then inside of our last piece, the dry run variable, this one's near and dear to my heart. By default, this actually won't send this up to Snowflake when you run it. It'll actually just print it out locally so that you can triple check on your work. Because as you all know, modifying things in production is just really stressful. So I like to have that ability to make sure I'm actually going to be executing what I should be executing. And there you have it. A macro to manage our Snowflake user base in approximately 50 lines of code. Simple as that. So let's take a look at what it actually takes to run this. So as with our other macros, we can actually execute them using a dbt run operation. And with a little bit of CLI magic, cat. No, not a magic cat, but actually cat the command on your command line. The cat command reads data from the file that you pass in as an argument and gives this content as output. So you can imagine copy and pasting the contents of your user file each time you want to run this. This really just simplifies our life, and only a small reason why I really love the usage of command line tools. So that said, let's see what this actually looks like as we're running it, if it wants to cooperate. All right, so we have our run operation, as I just showed. Execute upon that, and it spits it out to your terminal. You can go through, see it is exactly as we had set it up inside of the macro, but dynamically generating everything from our users file. So really simple way to send this on Rails. So what does it take to actually add a user to this? Let's go ahead and hop back to our users file, copy over myself, and paste in all these key value attributes. So I'm going to be adding our analyst Grace. Grace, if you're watching this, I'm hopefully you're okay with me using your likeness. All right, sorry, I'm a slow typer here. Also, this is not her email, so for those of you salespeople that are going to reach out to her, don't worry, this isn't a real one. All right, so we can keep most of everything that we have inside of here. Remove the account admin access. Obviously, we don't want her to have that. Go ahead and execute our statement again. And voila, there she is, right at the end of our execution. She is now created and altered to exactly as she should be. All right, simple, right? No, everyone thinks it's too complex. Oh no, get me out of here. Okay, so that being said, quickly ran through kind of what it took to create our user statements. As you saw, really easy way to set up, scale out to as many objects as you want. But it is limited to DBT locally. So inside of that run operation, you did see I used the cat command. This is actually something that DBT Cloud doesn't really play well with. That being said, if you are using DBT Cloud, this is something that you can still use. We use DBT Cloud to execute all of our runs. And all of our analysts really love the IDE and the whole get on Rails approach to everything. If that is the case, you can just download this, put it on your local dev environment, and to execute these commands. And then last thought, the use of other external tools. So in talking with a few of you out there, you've brought up the usage of Terraform, Permafrost or Terraform. These are really great tools, and I would actually highly recommend comparing against them if you're deciding to use a different framework to manage these objects. We actually tried to set them up, but unfortunately when we were doing that, they actually didn't have a way at the time to manage our snowpipes, which was our initial use case for all of this. These two other tools are really great if you have really complex systems that require a lot of fine-tuned access controls, or if you're a larger company, more than likely you have a data engineer available, or are even one yourself that is really more attuned with more of these DevOps tasks. Definitely look into checking those out. But really kind of getting back into the ethos of why we really went to look at these, it's really just designing to add these engineering workflows for our analysts so that they're more comfortable with SQL to maintain a warehouse infrastructure. So you thought you'd get through a presentation at a data conference without a big metric up here on the screen. We've been using these types of tools for a little over a year now, and we've really had minimal changes since when we first commit them. It really just goes to show you how solid they are. Once they're created, the only maintenance they require is really just adding improvements to the flow. That said, the time has come to ask for your assistance, crowd. If this has gotten your brain buzzing and you'd like to implement something like this, or you have questions on this topic, or you'd like to make a contribution, go ahead and scan this QR code. It's just a link straight to an example repo that I have set up, so you can go in, steal this code from me, ask me some questions, make some commits, make some suggestions. You want to turn this into a DBT package, let's go for it. There's a lot of smarter people out there than myself. I'm sure we can make something great of it. All right, and that is it. That is snowflaking yourself. Woo!
Thank you, Dan, for an awesome presentation. We'll let this linger for a little bit while I make some housekeeping announcements. But again, just a reminder to drop your questions and comments in the Coalesce Snowflake Yourself Using Slack channel. Don't be alarmed if Dan doesn't get to your questions right. They'll linger here for a little while to answer any questions y'all have in the room, but then transition to Slack shortly after. That's a wrap for this room. There's no talk in this room afterwards. However, just some quick reminders for folks here in New Orleans. We have a second line kickoff parade happening that will be starting in the Hyatt. And don't quote me on this, but I'm fairly certain that we will be gathering in the Hyatt foyer, which is just outside of these Celestian ballrooms around 6 p.m. So hope to see you all there. In the meantime, we have a few more talks, so enjoy yourself. Thanks.